Bullets seared through the tent roof. Screams overlapped with the blare of sirens. The entire medical station was deserted, except for one small woman with a worn medical pack. But instead of hiding, she broke the lock, climbed onto the container roof, and silently raised her rifle. In 8 seconds, 4 snipers were taken down. No one knew where her Scar R came from, and no one could explain why, when she sent a signal, a long deactivated code name lit up again. Echo 5. If you ever believed the quiet ones have nothing to say, this is a story you need to see. And if your heart tightens at the end, please like, share, and subscribe to help spread the respect owed to the forgotten. The medical tent was nearly empty. Stained with age, the sand-colored tarp hung low and trembled in the early wind. A lone figure knelt in the center. No lights, no voices, just the pale yellow sunbeam slanting through the flap, casting a long shadow across the cold dirt floor. The woman, hair tied tight, skin sun-worn, opened each compartment of her medical backpack. Her hands moved slowly. Not hurried, but not idle either. They trembled faintly, yet steadily, checking each syringe, each bandage, each scalpel honed in advance. No superior called her name. No one assigned her a task. She stayed because someone had to. A scuffed metal medical box sat by her feet. On the lid, an old photograph, yellowed with time. 10 soldiers stood on a stretch of white sand, each bearing the patch of a black falcon. Echo 5. A unit was erased from records 3 years ago. One of them, standing beside her, had a blazing smile. His name now only lived in a casualty file. Lena Serafina. No one knew who she was. Some called her the bandage girl, who remained after every drill. Some whispered she was a former volunteer doctor, dismissed for psychological reasons. Others shrugged. Probably just a misplaced supply runner. But they didn't notice. The boots she wore were special ops tactical. Her fingers bore scars from stitching others, not herself. And her eyes, though calm, did not belong to a trainee. Only one person paid attention. Torres, a young medic newly assigned, had seen Lena's precision, how she never needed to look at the needle. Torres had once dreamed of becoming a surgeon, but her family had objected. Too dangerous, too expensive. She understood now. People like Lena weren't beginners. They'd been through something and had nothing left to prove. Outside, the camp radio forecasted a sandstorm. A mass casualty drill would follow. Inside the tent, Lena quietly sat by her medical box. She opened the lid, tucked the photo into her chest pocket, then folded her gloves, like prepping for a familiar surgery. She didn't glance outside, didn't hesitate. She stayed, not out of duty, but because in that photo, someone had died believing in her. And this time, she wouldn't let that happen again. Night settled over the field in an unnatural silence. No wind, no insects, just a faint static from the wall-mounted radio, like someone had spoken halfway and then gone quiet. Lena sorted her med pack. Scalpel, suture needle, hemostatic gauze. IV lines are wrapped in cloth and secured tightly. Every item in its exact place, like a ritual repeated for years. She glanced through the flap. Outside, the night watch was rotating, but no one spoke. Their faces carried a look, as if they'd heard something they didn't yet understand. Then rushed footsteps, a faint, trembling voice. A young soldier, hair disheveled, left shoulder bleeding, stumbled in, too young to carry a rifle, old enough to understand pain. He knelt by the stainless table, too scared to call for help. The other medics had already been ordered to evacuate due to a red alert. Only Lena remained. She looked at him, didn't ask, didn't react, just opened her bag, pulled on gloves, and gently took his arm. Her movements, swift, practiced, spoke of a lifetime of repetition. 3 stitches, a rinse with hydrogen peroxide. She wrapped the wound, fastened the cloth brace, and placed a water bottle in his hand. He stared at her, as if seeing something without a name. She'd seen that look before, long ago during a mission where she'd been left behind. Suddenly, red lights flashed outside. A piercing siren, sharp, intermittent, rang out. Red echo, a top-tier emergency signal, used only when an unexpected assault was imminent. The whole base came alive. Officers shouted into their radios. A medic rushed by, yanking Lena's arm. "Let's go!" HQ ordered full evac, non-combatants to the ridge. But Lena didn't move. Her hand was already on her pack strap, not to lift it, but to open it. From a hidden compartment in the back, she quietly pulled out a crumpled map, marked with high ground coordinates, and an old radio unit, worn but still working. Its screen lit up. "Eve, reactivate?" She didn't press confirm, just stared, as if waiting for something that could no longer be delayed. In the empty tent, only the static remained, and the open medical box, a silent witness that the last one to stay hadn't been forgotten. She just hadn't forgotten who she was. Right after the red echo alert, Lieutenant Brandt gathered the entire medical team at the secondary evacuation point. Torres was still shaken, replaying the moment Lena stood still, unmoving, while everyone else ran. Some medics whispered, "What is she doing? Didn't she hear the evacuation order?" No one could understand why someone with no official rank stayed behind after a full mobilization. A voice muttered, "She's just the bandage girl anyway." In the command center, Carver received a report. Someone stayed behind at the medical post, unidentified, no tactical gear. He frowned and pulled up the personnel file. Lena's name wasn't listed on the current roster. Probably a clerical error. Says LD, but there's no enlistment date logged." Another officer asked, "Is she Echo 5? Carver scoffed. "Echo 5 is a fairy tale. That team was wiped during a failed op at Three-Faced River. If anyone survived, they wouldn't qualify for reactivation. No mission code, no active clearance." He signed the order. Temporarily revoke medical access. No authorization to use tactical storage. Private Riley overheard. He remembered the message flashing on the old radio. E5. Reactivate? Curious, he slipped into the old map archives. There, in the bottom drawer, he found a weathered folder. Cauquim Ponce Delta Operation. Status, missing. A team photo slipped out. 4 people. One woman, wearing a cap, stood at the edge. Her face was unclear, but Riley knew that stance, those eyes, it was her. In the yard, Torres sat by a temporary tent, recalling when she first met Lena. She had transferred in from another medical post. No one knew her background. She never slept more than 2 hours, never kept a journal. But everyone stitched by her. None needed a second round of antibiotics. Torres flipped through the inventory log, Lena's record of each case. On the final page was a line in slanted handwriting. "Do if no one remembers their names, at least remember how they were saved." Torres gripped the notebook. Something stirred in her chest. A strange shame, realizing she had once doubted that woman. That night, Carver quietly left a note inside the medical box. "I didn't believe, but I was wrong. If you truly are Echo 5, then live like it." No one saw Lena read it, but by morning, the note had been folded neatly, left next to a fresh roll of bandages. Noonlight slipped softly through the canvas, casting streaks across the rough dirt floor. No one called Lena Bandage Girl anymore, but no one dared ask who she was. Inside the medical tent, Lena stitched a wound on a young soldier, Riley, the same one who had quietly tucked the Echo 5 photo into his chest pocket. He stayed silent, but when she made the final stitch, their eyes met. For a moment, Riley no longer looked at her as a medic. Sitting at the rear table, Torres turned the logbook's pages. The last page still bore Lena's handwritten line, but now something else caught her eye. A faint, embroidered mark, only visible when sweat soaked through the fabric. A black bird in flight beneath it. The initials S5. No one knew what S5 meant. There was no such unit code on record. Outside, Carver watched the medevac team run an evacuation drill. His gaze stopped when he saw Lena quietly step back, holding the door open for a limping soldier. No one mentioned it. No one thanked her. But he saw it. That evening, he said nothing more, just told the duty officer, "Keep her. There's no better lead for this med unit." Then he turned away, the same note he'd written still in hand, now slightly crumpled, but not discarded. Torres brought the S5 emblem to Riley. Neither of them could be sure, but Riley told her about the old photo and the story of a special operations unit erased after the Delta campaign. "I think Lena is the last one left," Riley said. Torres sat quietly, then nodded. "And she's still here. No orders, no call sign, but she hasn't left." That night, in silence, Torres walked over to Lena. No logbook, no radio, just a slip of paper left on the table. "I once wanted to be a doctor, but now I want to learn from you." She didn't sign it, but she left her first medical pin, a gift from her father, who was once a combat medic. Lena didn't respond. But the next morning, the pin was clipped beside her scratched silver tag. E5, Serafina. Riley ran a test on the backup UAV link and picked up a faint signal. Echo 5, reactivate, unknown status. At that very moment, a breeze swept away the thin layer of dust on the Echo 5 photo. In its top left corner, the S5 embroidery matched perfectly with Lena's logbook symbol. Late in the afternoon shift, fine dust drifted through the air, and the wind carried a damp scent from the direction of the command post. Torres was just closing up the medical kit when she overheard a low mutter. "She shouldn't be here." The voice belonged to Lieutenant Brandt, who once mocked Lena for her worn-out boots. Torres stepped outside and saw a group of officers huddled around the UAV monitor. A transmission error had just caused a drone to be shot down, exposing the recon unit's location. Beneath the control panel, a warning blinked. Unknown transmitter ID. Tag E5. No one said a name, but every pair of eyes turned toward the medical post. Lena, still silent, was washing her instruments, dried blood on her gloves. The medical badge still lay beside her silver tag. Echo 5. That evening, Carver received an order from above. Terminate the unknown signal. Sweep the compound. Suspect. Echo 5. No records on file. He looked down at his desk, where the crumpled paper still sat. The one he had once signed to let Lena stay. He neither approved nor destroyed it. Riley, checking the signal system, found an old document tucked inside a toolbox. A torn copy referencing Echo 5, scribbled with a note. Program terminated after the Delta incident. All members, MIA or confirmed KIA, except for one unidentified individual. The next morning, Lena walked into the command center. She had just saved a soldier from bleeding out. But as she set the report down, a young officer handed her a folded slip of paper without a word. Medical duties suspended, awaiting identity clearance. No one met her gaze. Torres stood frozen outside the tent. Riley wanted to speak, but only gripped the old photo tighter. Lena didn't protest. She removed her gloves, set them on the steel tray, and bowed her head, not in shame, but like someone watching something painfully familiar repeat itself. She padded into the empty yard, carrying only her old pack. No one stopped her. Only Carver watched from a window. And for the first time, he realized the one person the entire system called unidentified was the only one who truly knew what she was doing. Torres stood under the awning, lips moving. "We just lost someone," Riley whispered in reply. "No, we just made her walk away." A burst of gunfire tore through the southern ridge. The alarm screamed. The ground shook beneath their boots. The camp trembled. Figures ran through red dust and shifting sand. The control station reported a blackout in the UAV signal. Moments later, infrared picked up 3 unidentified heat sources. On the high ground, opposite flank, Lena stood up. No one called her name. From the base of her pack, she pulled a fabric-wrapped scar arm. Its canvas faded, like it had passed through wars no one wrote about. No one asked. No one stopped her. She stepped past stretchers left behind, past Torres, who stood frozen by the medical box, climbed the ladder behind the supply container, the same one soldiers used to hang laundry. At the top, Lena lay flat, hands locked onto the scope, adjusted for wind, dialed the heat. No one at the outpost knew her real name. They only saw a small figure, no rank, no words, aiming with calm so absolute it erased the chaos. Wind tugged a strand of hair across her brow. 4 infrared figures glowed in the scope, like shadows stalking prey, unaware of the kill. So 8 seconds. Were 4 rounds? Were 4 snipers dropped? Total silence. All captured by the auxiliary UAV's camera. The feed streamed straight to the command center, where the officers didn't know why. Those eyes looked familiar. Down below, Carver stood motionless. Torres didn't blink. Riley clenched the old discharge order in his hand, now wrinkled and damp. A red flash blinked on the handheld monitor. Words appeared. Lena said nothing. She tapped the confirm button, then quietly slid down from the roof. She returned to the medical post. Her hands were still stained with old blood from the soldier she had stitched earlier. She sat at the steel table, opened a fresh stretcher. No one spoke. No one called her name. Just the soft clink of metal, forceps touching tray, as if the gunfire had never happened, as if she had simply returned from the restroom. No applause, no salutes, but for the first time, the entire outpost went still as she walked past, and across the dust-blown yard, a black helicopter began to descend. Wind spiraled the sand as the black helicopter touched down in the center yard. Rotor blades kicked up red dust. The sun dimmed beneath the haze. No sirens, no orders, no soldiers to escort the landing. A lone figure stepped out, a faded uniform, dust-covered desert boots. No insignia, no escort. Just one man, silver hair, a straight back, holding a thin folder, walking across the base as if he'd never left. The camp fell silent. Someone removed their cap. Others lowered their rifles. Hurried footsteps slowed, as if something more solemn than orders had just arrived. He stopped before the medical tent. Lena was still bent over, bandaging another wounded soldier. Her shoulders remained unmoved, her eyes fixed on the wound she was stitching. The older man removed his gloves slowly, and then, in front of people who had never heard her name, he raised his hand in salute. A proper salute, elbow precise, wrist over heart. No one gave a signal. Yet soldiers nearby fell into silence, standing straight. The wind died. The wall that once stood between her and the rest collapsed, not with explosions, but with a silent bow of the head. Torres stood by the tent door, eyes red, still holding the crumpled paper. Riley tilted slightly, trying to see Lena's face under the strands of her loose hair. Carver, who once barked orders, quietly placed a folded slip of paper on the medical table. No one knew what he wrote, only that it was folded carefully beside a faded old badge. The old general didn't state his name, didn't point anyone out. He handed a thin note to Riley. Riley opened it. Just one handwritten line. Return this to the one who saved the unit when everyone else turned away. No trumpet, no loudspeakers, no medals, but for the first time, those who once mocked her, once doubted her, had nothing left to hide behind. Brandt, the soldier who laughed at her worn-out boots, stood at the supply station's door. The bandage on his arm was still the one Lena wrapped, and today, he didn't roll down his sleeve to cover it. Torres watched as Lena crossed the yard. No straightened spine like a commander, no claim of honor. She didn't turn, she didn't wave. She walked away as she had arrived, quiet. But this time, everyone saw. The next morning, the base returned to routine. Boots hit the ground. Orders echoed through radios. Rifles were cleaned with discipline. But something was different. No one mentioned bandage girl. No one chuckled when a medic bent over to stitch, or when mismatched boots walked the yard. The medical tent was open, but the corner of the steel table where Lena once sat was empty. Torres was the first to notice. The kit was perfectly packed. Gauze, needles, thread, all in place, as if prepared for the next shift. No notes, no written farewells, just an old photograph, flattened and clean, placed beside a worn metal tag, engraved, Echo 5, Serafina 0722. 21. Torres touched the tag. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from knowing this wasn't just a military identifier. It was a message passed down, in action, not in words. Far off, Riley stood beneath the supply container's awning. In his hand, the old code black rain file, now neatly folded, slipped into his left chest pocket like a quiet vow. Lena was gone. No one saw her leave the compound. Some said an unmarked helicopter picked her up. Others said she disappeared after her final shift, as if she'd never existed. But a technician opened a small wooden drawer behind the medical supply room 3 days later. Inside, wrapped carefully, it was a hand-stitched cloth, a dressing embroidered along the edge in fine silver thread, marked S5. It didn't belong to any unit. The unit commander looked at the fabric, then nodded. Leave it. Nothing more. But in his eyes, something had clicked, that others were still trying to understand. That evening, only one figure remained in the medical tent. Torres sat by the steel table, opened the medical bag. She placed the Echo 5 tag and the photograph into the side pocket, the one few ever touched. No oath, no promises, but her hand never left that bag during the entire shift. Outside, the wind swept up the sand like mist, and someone, no one knew who, had taped a note to the tent door. Just one line written in pencil. If you ever come back, your place is still here.